We're in our third lockdown in Toronto, and unlike the first one, you can really tell people are frustrated because let's face it, being restricted is really hard. But we're getting used to it, the vaccine's on the way, and many people are hoping that their name is on that list. It's just a matter of sitting and waiting for it to finally get here. But the show must go on. People are still calling for plumbing, we still risk exposure, and I'm coming to realize that there's a big caregiving element to our trade. People feel vulnerable without their fixtures. They feel worried when something is misbehaving. They feel relief when the problem is resolved. And the buildings we end up going to take on a personality of their own. You become so acquainted with them that you can swear sometimes you feel like you understand them, kind of like you would a person or a pet. So the tenant is experiencing water leaking into their unit. Leaks can either be really easy to locate or an absolute nightmare, but the first thing you want to do is expose the area and try to recreate it. I start by testing the strainer, the P-trap, and the spout. I fill the tub up a bit, I drain it, then I let some water run. I checked, and in this instance, no dice. I then move towards the overflow. I splash water towards it and I see if the seal is compromised. I also check the shower head by pulling the diverter, but again it came back bone dry. So I start looking for weaknesses around the tub. Are there any loose tiles? Does the tub have any small fractures? In this instance, the weakest link for me was the caulking around the tub. Modern tubs usually have a lip that the drywall and tile goes over, but these old tubs I'm working on do not, so the silicone plays a much bigger role than in most modern bathrooms. I find the weakest spots, remove the old silicone, I put fresh silicone around. Like in a lot of investigations, we're waiting for more clues. Until then, hopefully this solves the issue. A lot of conversations I have with tenants now revolve around mental health. How is the lockdown treating you is probably my most used question. A lot of people have expressed the same struggles. It could be financially difficult, it's hard being cooped up, homeschooling's a challenge, there's anxiety, grocery shopping. Overall, people just seem to miss their activities, and I have to be honest, I miss them as well. But by asking them these questions, we get a piece of normalcy back through friendly interaction and emotional connection. I always go through a test phase before putting on a toilet flange extension kit. I want to make sure we get the right height. If it's too low, I try changing the gasket or I add more extensions. Once I'm pleased with the height by feeling the rubber gasket compress under the bowl, we add silicone to the kits and also the gasket. We're trying to ensure that when the water closet is discharged, all the water flows through the flange and not around it. By adding silicone to the bottom of the rubber gasket, you also make it difficult for it to shift upon installation. It's not necessary, but it's an added measure we like to put in. After we secure it in place, we finish the installation. Sometimes self-care is the hardest to do because it requires active work at the beginning. You have to force yourself to read, you have to force yourself to lift weights, you have to force conversations on boundaries, and it's exhausting at a time when you feel exhausted. But at some point we all realize that without doing the work, we have left ourselves behind, and life is still moving forward. But once you force the first chapter, you fall in love with the characters. Once you force the first set, the endorphins kick in. Once you force the drawing of boundaries, you are protected by them. So don't forget to care for yourself. It may be hard, but you're worth it. And don't forget to sprinkle in some easy stuff as well so you don't feel overwhelmed. There's something to be said about balance. It's easy to tip the scales, and then you're too busy trying to stop everything from falling to be progressing. And progress takes time. Remember, there was a point when I didn't even know how to use a pair of channel lock pliers. I didn't know what a flange was, I never installed a toilet, I never drilled a hole, and that was only 7 years ago. I got to this point through a bunch of repetitions, and a lot of those were epic fails, and I still fail to this day. But if I didn't fail all those times, the tenant with the leak would still have it dripping on their head. The owner with no toilet would have to use an alternative washroom, and all those people I asked how they were holding up during the pandemic might have never had that conversation. And instead of letting the steam out of the kettle, it might have just boiled a bit longer. We depend on you to go through the struggle so that we can accompany you in your victories. My favorite moments are when you all message me and you say, Kenny, I got an interview, or I started my apprenticeship, or I installed my first vanity. It lets me know that it's not a dream anymore. You are officially a contender. So from me in the new studio to all of you back at home, let's go do some delicious plumbing.